Welcome back, guys. So today we're going to be working on my 97 Seadoo SPX 787. As you can see, I already have the motor out. It's pretty dirty in there. We're going to get that cleaned up. I'm going to fix some hull damage on the bottom of the hull. Maybe I'll make some videos on that. As you see over here, I got the engine all out and everything. I was actually having a charging problem. So I've already done some tests, but I'll run over everything I did to determine that the stator was actually bad. And we'll go through the manual and I'll show you the process. So as you see here, we have a 787 Seadoo Rotax motor. We have the manual here. It goes over how to test the stator properly and such. If you don't have, you don't have to buy the best of the best. I have the snap-on kit. It comes with all the leads and the different fixtures. It makes it really, really handy to diagnose stuff like this. There's the part number if you're ever interested. I use a basic digital multimeter from Snap-on. Again, doesn't have to be Snap-on, doesn't have to be this fancy. I just bought this because I used to be in the industry and I like the big numbers so I could see things. So going over into the book here, so we're going to be doing a stator static test continuity. So we are going to start with this. I don't have the special wiring harness that it wants right here. So that's why I ended up just pulling the motor. It's easy enough for me to do. I can have the motor out in about 30 minutes. It's no big deal. So I pull the motor out so I can get this cover off. This cover is pretty hard to get to inside of the jet ski. I don't feel like bending over for a really long time. So I'd rather just pull the motor, get it out in front of me where I can see things. You know, you're not working with a mirror or anything like that. So I pulled the motor out, pulled the cover off, pulled the oil pump off. We get to everything we could see. Now, yes, it is in pretty bad condition inside of here. So what happens when the seal for the starter leaks, you'll get a little bit of water in here, you know, it gets mushed around, electricity, everything. Kind of makes a mess in there. So I'll get all that cleaned up before we put it back together. But let's start with the static test. So obviously it wants you to install the wiring harness, which I don't have. So we're going to set this to ohms. And what it wants you to do is you're checking resistance between two of the yellow wires. So all we're doing here is we're spinning a magnet around a stator, which is a windings, the copper windings, and that creates a AC pulse. And then it sends it to your rectifier regulator, and it converts it to your DC. So basically, we're checking to see what our ohms is between here to see if we have a broken strand somewhere. So I'm going to set this up so you guys can see it. So it doesn't really matter, you know, where you start. You just pick two yellow wires. We're going to clamp onto that one and this one. You're going to see nothing. So then we're going to try a different yellow wire. Nothing. So now we're going to try to move the red one to the other yellow wire. You're going to see on that one, it's an auto ranging, so it takes a moment to get to it. But you're going to see 0.7. Now, according to our manual, we can be from 0.1 to 1.0 ohms. So we are well within the spec limit on that coil. But as you noticed, if I go to any other wire, it does not show that. So the other two coils are dead. So that leads me to believe that this is our problem. So we have our new one here. We can do the same test. Test it right out of the box. So let's start with these two. Start with this one and this one. We're going to read our ohms. It's going to auto range. And it's going to show 0.4. Leaving the black lead right where it's at. Let's move our red one and go over to the next one. It's going to auto range again. It's going to show 0.4. Okay, leave that one right where it's at. Let's take our black lead and let's move it to our other yellow wire. It's going to do the same thing. It's auto ranging. It's going to search for it. 0.5, 0.6, 0.5, 0.6. It's bouncing a little bit. So there you can see this is a good stator. So you can see the difference between a bad stator and a good stator. That's one test you can do. There's another test, which this one actually passed the other test as well, which is testing the insulation on the copper wires itself. And that is a stack test insulation. So we're going to do basically the same thing. This one passed it, so I can't really show you a bad one, but you're going to do kind of the same thing. You're going to unplug the wiring. They want you to plug in their special harness. You probably don't have it as well as I don't. So you have to get to the yellow wires. Now what you want to do is, like this says, insert your multimeter lead, the yellow wire to harness, ground the multimeter to the engine somewhere, and see if you have any continuity between the stator windings and ground. Now if you have continuity between your stator winding and ground, electricity is very, very lazy. It wants to go back to ground as easily as possible. So if we have a direct short to ground, it's going to just eliminate that circuit and directly go to ground. And you're not going to be able to create any electricity because it rather go from this winding into this ground than go out these wires. Because like I said, electricity is very, very lazy. So now that we tested everything, we know how everything goes. Let's put it back together and see what we get. Okay, so now that we know the stator is bad, we're going to go through, we're going to clean up some of this hardware so we can put the new stator in. As you can see, all this hardware needs to be cleaned up so we can get some good threads. And yeah, let's get it done. You never want to hold on to this stuff with your fingers. You always want to use a pair of pliers or vice grips or something of that nature. And basically, you're just trying to get all the junk out of the threads, so that way it doesn't gall anything up. I like to just run it right around like that. And then you get a pretty good bolt. So we'll set you up on a little time lapse here. We'll get the rest of these cleaned up and then we'll meet back. All right, now that we got our hardware cleaned up, let's take a look at the case here. We're not going to get too crazy. We're just going to knock off the loose stuff on the mounting surfaces. This is your pickup trigger, so this is what reads the top of your magnet there and tells the engine when to spark, or tells the computer when to spark, sorry. The jet ski ran fine, it just didn't charge the battery, so I don't suspect any problems with this. So we're just going to clean it up a little bit, put some grease on it, and we're going to get it assembled. All right, so now that we know we have a good stator, our stator is nice and clean, obviously it's brand new. The cover's nice and clean. We got our mounting all cleaned up. This can only really go on one way. With the wires, the way the casting is, there's a big divot down here, and this casting's bigger, so it really can only fit on this way. So we're going to start with plugging all the wires in. So if you took yours apart or got yours apart, bought it in parts or so, and you don't know where the wires go into here. The wiring diagram will not help you very much because it just shows the wires. It doesn't show the actual plugs. So the one thing you could do is you could go to the motor, or I'm sorry, not the motor. You should go to the jet ski and find the wiring from the white box and see which pins go where. So we're going to grab our ECM. And this right here is our stator connection. So as you can see, we have 3 yellow wires. And then on the other side, we have a black, a white, and a black. And looking here, we have these 2 wires. You have a black and 3 yellows. So this plugs in directly like this. So if you look at it, your 2 wires, your 3 darks, and your 3 yellows. The yellows do not matter the orientation. It does not matter. AC current does not care which side's which. So these ones can just go into that side, and then your one last remaining wire will be this one. So we will get these plugged in, snapped into place just like so. And that will be that. Okay, so first things first here, we're going to move our wires kind of out of the way, do everything. First thing we got to put in is this plate. So you can kind of see this plate's kind of angled one way or the other. Put it whichever way faces the wires the best way. And that plate is held on by these 2 little screws. So anytime I put screws in, especially in a marine environment, I use just the littlest, tiniest amount of some sort of grease. Now I like this stuff from Quicksilver, Mercury, whatever you want to call it. It's called 2,4-C marine lubricant. It's pretty much good for everything: O-rings, gaskets, hardware, a little bit of everything. A little dab will do you. You don't need a lot. You don't need to goop it on. I like to just put just a little bit on the threads, just so I know next time it's going to come apart. I don't have to worry about corrosion. I don't have to worry about, a steel bolt going into an aluminum case. It's just that little bit that helps. You put in whatever you feel comfortable with. I just like just a dab of grease. And I'm sure that there's torque specs in all of this, but we're going to go with the good and tight method. Once you turn wrench for long enough, you kind of get a sense of the size of a fastener and how tight you should actually tighten it. So we're just going to continue on. Just put all the bolts back in. Like I said, just a little dab will do you on the grease. You don't have to go overboard. As you see, I just stick it in the tube. You get a little bit off of there. You can take off the excess. Boom. I like to snug them all up before I tighten them up. That way you don't get anything crooked or a little sideways or anything. And make sure when you're tightening Allen keys that or I should say Allen bolts, that your Allen is all the way into the socket head. You don't want it halfway out so it'll strip. So the last piece of this puzzle is, like I said, this magnetic pickup. So this just sits here like this. There's no adjustments. There's no anything. This just goes in just like that. You put the 2 hold down bolts in, and we're done. Now, as I said, this is possible with the motor still in the jet ski. It's totally feasible. Um, like I also said, I've had this motor out of this jet ski lots of times. I've had this jet ski for multiple years. Um, I'm pretty familiar with what it takes to get the motor out. I'm pretty equipped and set up here in this little shed to pull the motor pretty quick. So it's just easier for me to pull the motor than it is to bend over the jet ski. So we're going to tighten these up and make sure nothing's on our little sensor here. Nothing's on this. Well, as you can see inside of here, these pins are kind of a little crooked and such. And it's called a Deutsch connector, and they give you this holding piece that you have to apply back in here in the center. So all these terminals are held in right now. So you just want to, let's see, put this in here. So as you can see, get our stator all put that together. Got our pickup coil. Got our Deutsch connector all put that together. Fought me a little bit, but I got it. So you have a groove here in the case. Here's one dowel. Here's another dowel. Make sure you have those. Very important. And you can see here it has a raised bevel right here. So that bevel fits into this groove, which has a small O-ring in it. So what I like to do, again, is just a little bit of grease. Nothing too much. It just kind of helps seal the moisture out. Helps things out. You know, don't pack it. Don't go crazy. Just if you don't want to do this, if it's against your opinion to do this, you don't want to, you don't have to. It's not in the manual. It doesn't tell you to do this. You know, at the end of the day, it's your motor, your jet ski. You do what sees fit. I just know that this is going to see water, and I am sure I'm going to have to take this apart again because I always have to take this thing apart because I'm very rough on this thing. So I rather have it. Something to note as well. Make sure that you have your oil pump drive installed in the end of the crank for your oil pump. Unless yours is premixed, you don't have to worry about it. I don't know why you would ever premix one of these when they have oil injection, and it's one of the most flawless systems. It's very nice to be able to go up to a marina and just put gas in a jet ski and go. I don't carry oil with me. The oil tank lasts about 2 full tanks, a little bit more if the oil light comes on, which is a lot of riding for me and the style that I ride. So I have no need to carry oil. If I was to do a longer trip, maybe I would carry oil, but still. So what we're going to do here, you can see the magnets all clean. We have our oil pump drive already installed. Okay. So what we're going to do, dowel pin. Now it's going to want to grab it just like it did because it's a magnetic, obviously. Or it's a magnet, sorry. So you might have to finagle with it a little bit. Get your 2 dowels lined up. And everything should fit on pretty copacetic. I know you can't really see here, but our drive shaft for our oil pump is right there in the center. So we're all good there. We'll get the oil pump bolted up and then see what we get. there's the cover. All right, so now that we got front cover all on, and everything's ready, we can now put the oil pump back together. Now the only tricky thing with the oil pump is just lining the shaft back up. So you have a shaft right here. It's kind of a flathead type looking thing. And it has to line up with that in there. So normally you can just kind of look at it, make a good educated guess. You can usually get enough of a wiggle to get it right in just like that. Now, same thing, you know, a little grease on the bolts. A little bit now will save you a lot later. So there's a short one and there's a long one. It's pretty hard to mess them up. The short one goes on the short side, the long one goes on the long side. Nothing much to them. So now that you got the oil pump all put back together, that is it for a stator replacement. At this point, if you're doing it in the jet ski itself, you'd hook the oil cable back up, plug your stator in, put your motor mount back in because you'd have to pull the motor mount to get this out. And then, to be honest with you, I don't even know if it's possible to do it with the motor, and it might not be. Because now that I think about it, that motor mount sits here. You might be able to just position the motor right just to get the cover off, but I suggest just pulling the motor. But at this point, now this is a good time to inspect your oil lines too as well. But at this point, you can snap your oil lines back into their holders. And then you are done. Put the motor back in, hook everything up, and that'll be for a different video. So thanks for watching. If you guys want to see anything else, just comment down below. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. Just starting off, so I'll take whatever you guys got. Thanks.